So this is a post recording. I'm changing it to gallery
Yeah,
view for everyone so they can see us both at the same time. This is a post recording of an hour.
we're supposed to be chilling.
We're chilling. We're chilling. We just had a beautiful conversation that I'll link to uh, in the description of this video. Um, and what you alluded to, Craig, is at the end of that conversation, we really talked about the difference between audio and video,
I would say
and
geeked out would be a better. I have to
totally
own
geeked
that. I have
out.
to own
Yeah.
that.
I'm
Just
owning the
all
fact.
in on it.
Yeah, yeah, all in. Like we totally geeked out on audio. Um, but the what are the advantages to this? Like I love audio
Um,
only. I love audio
this is
only.
nice too because I can make like you can like I'm Italian. We always joke. You want to make my mom stop talking? Just grab our hands. It actually works. If you grab my mom's hand, she goes. Um,
That
anyway,
look, it probably looks
there's
just like that.
oh yeah, my mom. I have okay Italian mother. That's my mom. She's awesome. Boy, can she cook. But yes. Anyway, what the heck were we talking about? Oh, video. I think that don't get all like self-conscious. I think gallery view messes the viewers up because you're looking at but
Oh,
don't switch it. Don't switch. You're looking
I'm
at two humans.
switching it.
No, don't. You're looking at two humans who are looking. So let's say, listener, I'm pointing at you. I'm not pointing at, well, in my world, Vivian's over here, right? So it's like, Vivian and I are having this really heartfelt conversation, but we're looking at the listener. And if you imagine being in a context where two people were having a conversation, but they stared at you, you'd be like, "Mm." So I started, and I kind of think gallery is good for this, but I started remembering to go to speaker view when I'm recording in video. So at least what you're looking at is this kind of odd situation where, as the listener, you have inserted yourself in front of the speaker, so the other person's, but at least then you feel like they're talking to you. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's part of what gives people, the Zoom exhaustion thing in Zoom meetings, hey, 2020, right? In Zoom meetings for hours and hours and hours. I think part of what's exhausting is your brain the amount of information that you are exposed to through your senses is ridiculous. So your brain is constantly like ignore, ignore, ignore. And I think seeing a Hollywood Squares, oops, there's a dated reference, a Hollywood Squares brick of people,
Yeah.
your brain spends too much effort like trying to like look at all the people, as opposed to if you're in a room with 20 people having a conversation, you can fall asleep in the middle of that, but somehow the grid of people just keeps you like hyper aware. And I think that's part of the breaking the misalignment of the visual cues.
Well, I'm gonna continue with that because I believe that another misalignment is the fact that I'm looking at you. So if I were having an in-person conversation, my favorite conversation is walking side by side.
Mm,
Because when you're
yes.
walking side by side, I mean, and it's more with males than females because it's kind of like that animal. You play sports side by side. You don't. It's aggressive when it's against each other.
Yep. Yep. Turn your feet out a
So
little bit if you don't want to have a confrontation, right?
exactly. I mean, these are things that our bodies learned a long time ago. It's a really old part of who we are. And if we can dance around that, this is not the best way.
Haha, my microphone's on boom.
Should I
So
do
like if I
this?
go like this, I need a mirror so I can see it. I'm like, this feels
Oh
completely
my
different.
gosh, we could do that
Right?
too.
This
It
is
would
totally changes
actually
everything.
look like we're talking to each other if we do
Yeah.
that. I think
Yeah.
that
I
is
mean,
so cool.
especially if I like talk to you as if you're over to the side. Anyway,
But
totally.
I think the idea of people having conversations and wanting them to be deep and rich, these are things that they need to recognize or actually be aware of
Yeah.
if they're not already.
Yeah. When your spidey senses tingle, what's up with that? Like, why is this conversation suck? Not this one, but like the one that I'm in. Why does this suck? Why do I feel like, or why am I tired or different things? So,
What does it feel like when your spidey senses tingle? What is that sensation
uh,
in your body?
so what, I mean, well, okay. If you've ever had your hair stand up on your back and neck, I'm not talking about that's at that point you need to step left and then look behind you. But what I mean when I say spidey senses tingling, for me, and I don't know if I've ever thought about this before, it would be when my attention keeps going somewhere that doesn't seem to warrant my attention. So we could do like a self-defense scenario. Why do I keep looking at that car? You know, or like, why does I keep looking at this strange person in the crowd over here? Like, what's going on with that? But it can also be, I'm exhausted. You know, like I'm talking to Vivi for an hour and a half, and like, you know, I really want to go have lunch, or you know, like, why does my attention keep going to lunch? Like the human being should be way more interesting. Is way more interesting. I'm making it up. It's a totally bogus example. But when I realize that my attention is like, why do I keep looking at this? Why am I looking at the light? It's not, oh, it's on fire. Oh, you know, but I noticed that a minute ago, like the brain was like, you need to pay attention to that. That's what I mean when I say spidey senses are tingling, when there's a disconnect between where I think my attention should be and where I keep finding it.
Yes. I'm going to use a different kind of example, and it may just be because of my life experiences, because I need to develop that kind of attention a lot more than I have. Exactly. I go through the world like, hello. But one example of me not knowing, but my spidey senses tingling. A girlfriend was visiting, and we were about to go on a road trip, and I was putting together a snack bag, and I have in my pantry all the nuts, right? Almonds, walnuts, pecans, cashews, the whole thing, raisins, cranberries. And so I'm putting all these together, and for some reason I skip over the cashews, and I didn't think twice about it. And we were in the car maybe an hour or 2 hours later. And I said, do you want a snack? I said, I made us some snack. And she goes, no, I can't have it. I was like, why?
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. She said, I'm allergic to cashews. I said, well, I didn't put them in there.
Yeah.
And she's like, why? And I said, I don't know.
No. Yes.
Yeah. There are layers of our awareness that we don't.
Humans are amazing.
Fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
The capacity that we have for these spidey senses, especially after a year like 2020, I think is just going to blow up if we let it.
Yeah.
If we let the body fine tune itself to where it needs to go in alignment with our heart, right? Not the feeling part, but the soul, and the brain. I mean, the body, the brain, and the soul, when we can align those things together, there's a powerful force that can be released into our life and into our experience.
Yeah, it's, I don't know, I'm just like, I have millions of stories, and I was just thinking about, I love the rock climb. And I was climbing on a route, climbing on a place. I had a pretty easy start. So I'm in a section that's really easy. I mean, you don't want to fall. And the person that is my safety person is like 15 feet away. So I'm still talking to the other person. There's a big block, shaped like a dice, 6-sided dice, except like a small Volkswagen. Like, it's a huge thing. You would never think that was movable, right? You would just assume it's part of the world. It wasn't even, I was climbing here, it was behind me. And I leaned back on it to just like rest for a second, and it didn't move, but my spidey senses went, excuse me. So I like, takes a second, I turn around and I look at the size of this, I'm like, look at it. And I'm thinking, there's no way this block moves. So I pushed on it, and it didn't move. Like, it was absolutely solid. And I thought, So then I like put my shoulder against it, and I gave it like a real yooks, and it moved. It shifted a fraction of an inch, like a millimeter. Whatever was underneath it, it wasn't perfectly seated. And it just went like a millimeter, and that was it. It was absolutely going nowhere, but it wasn't absolutely stationary. It moved the slightest. And I was like, okay, this is, they would call that choss, like loose, like you should avoid it. And I'm like, this is a loose rock. It was just like a very deep reminder of like, these rocks are alive, and they change every day, and the weather and the water. And when I leaned on it, my brain went, wait, excuse me, that needs to be attended to. And when we were talking about spidey senses, I'm thinking about that rock. I think I took a picture of that rock from the ground. Like, see this enormous thing? It looks like it's part of the mountain. That's just sitting there, and it's not even fixed in place. Yeah.
A different fascination with rocks. It's not so much about climbing them; it's about just exploring them. We've been
So
to.
you're doing when you're climbing, only.
I'm hiking, I guess, right?
Yeah.
A big rock, not the indoor finger.
There's all kinds.
Like thing.
I don't like the indoor stuff. After you climb enough outdoors, you go indoors, you're just like, oh, this is. So you go to an indoor climbing gym, and you think if you haven't been to a lot of them, you walk in and you're overwhelmed with like, whoa, colors and routes and people and clothes. And I walk in there and I'm like, this is boring. There's only 15,000 handholds. This is nothing. And you go to like an outs, there's that much within. I don't teach rock climbing, but when I talk to people, I'm like, touch everything you can reach, every single little, and then if you move at all, touch it all again, because everything changes continuously. So there's so much of an exploration aspect to it.
Does that sport develop your exploration capacity in the world, do you think? Because of the way that it fine tunes you to experience?
It didn't like initially develop it. I think I had that on my initial climbing experience. I think literally the first time I tried to climb anything, like not even in a gym, I had a friend that I knew from martial arts for 10 years. He's like 20 years younger than me, but I knew him for a long time in that context. So we knew each other really well and we trusted each other. I found him on Facebook one day and I'm like, hey, what are you up to? And he said, I'm out in Boulder rock climbing, like living in a van, rock climbing, just that's what I was doing. And I'm like, wow. And he said, you should come out and climb, which he says to all of his friends. And unlike everybody else in the world, I went hearkening back to just go. I was like, when? And he was like, really? He's like, well, I have to finish. He was working a job, refinishing desks for a week. But after that, cool. So I think I had 5 weeks. I went to an indoor rock climbing gym literally every other day for 5 weeks. They thought I was nuts. You show up, you climb for 10 minutes and you're like, I got to stop or I'm going to get a blister. You can't, if I get a blister, I can't climb, I had to climb. And then I went out and I went like rocks. So it definitely is, it scratches the itch of perspective. And it's also a good way to get the shit scared out of yourself. My friend Mike says there's 3 kinds of fun in this world. Type 1 fun. This is fun right now. We're laughing. We're having a blast. Type 2 fun. This sucks, but we are going to be laughing at the bar later or like, this is a great story. And type 3 fun is, nope, this is not fun. I went out of here. I want to, mistakes were made. I want my life back. 3 kinds of. I went out there and it was a whole bunch of type 1 and type 2 fun. No type 3 fun.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Well, there's so many ways I could go into that.
This is why I love, like, I'll just keep throwing you things and it's up to you to be like, how many pins do you have?
Exactly. And I love that we've already sort of warmed up by having that hour. I think it was an hour conversation for audio for the podcast. And now we're just sort of riffing, kind of sharing an experience with each other. Post that so that we have a video.
What's a perspective that you've wanted to have that you've been afraid to go after?
What landed in my heart was, what is it? I was very afraid of what my perspective would be like when I was no longer a mother raising children. Mm. It melted me. But now post that, because they're grown men, it's different. I mean, there's some nostalgia around the fun times we had when they were young and the experiences, but the opportunity and the idea of allowing myself to experience them as humans who are unique and individual and outside of my husband and I, right there, that is cool. Like to be in engagement with them like I am with you without the story of I am your mother is an even more fascinating idea now. But I'll tell you that when that was happening, it was melting me. It was breaking me down in ways that I just wanted to fight with everything that I had inside of me. So that's a perspective that I didn't want. But now that I have it, I'm like, oh, this is cool. I can do this. This is interesting, right? That whole curiosity thing we talked about on the podcast and the novelty piece. And I don't know that we talked about it on the podcast, but I want to talk about it now. Your head goes like this.
Up left is that way and that way is right. So which way is lying? I think, isn't there one of those like when people look up and
and this sort of wraps up a lot of what we've talked about. One, being inside is not cool for me. I don't have my shoes on right now. Like I love to be outside and being in Texas allows me, like it was 70 degrees yesterday. So following this conversation, I'm going to take myself outside of these walls. but the novelty around experiencing nature, experiencing just your life, and also the novelty around, so that story leads into this. We can have a novel experience with another person if we allow it. And if we're not sort of breaking the porcelain of the identity that we see, then we're not really experiencing that person. And you and I started to talk about that on the podcast, and we didn't take that road or that path in the conversation, but I just wanted to revisit it here now because it kind of led into it. Like, we have an opportunity to have better conversations, better experiences, deeper, richer engagement with other humans and with life if we allow that novelty to sort of bubble up.
Yeah. There's something in in parkour or Arctic plasmon or free running in those worlds, which they usually call parkour vision. And it's a reference to when you start doing parkour, and it doesn't have to be jumping from one rooftop to another. It can just be, I'm picking on this 4-inch curve. That's my challenge today. When people start doing parkour, your world shifts. So you go from the person that you are, to this other person who was like, I remember that person. You didn't see 90% of the universe that was out there. There's cool stuff everywhere. There's railings. There's, all these, like, all this stuff. And you can, there's people who get interested in climbing challenges, which tends to be I have a very, some people who do parkour will joke about what's your spirit animal, because when you see people, humans are amazing. I mean, I've seen people do things that, I know exactly how they did it. I'm like, wow, they do stuff. And I'm like, could you do that again? That was so awesome. But my parkour spirit animal is a tree sloth. I would say, you're like, is he moving? Yeah, he's moving. Like, it's just real slow. I like 3 points of contact. I enjoy melding my brain with the physical environment, like the external application of my thought process. And countless times, I made a lot of friends this way. People walk up to me, like, I'll be struggling on something and they'll walk up to me, like standing at the height that I'm trying to climb to. And they'll be like, what the bleep are you doing? That's the first thing they'll say to me. And I'll be like, oh, here, try this. And then I'll explain, okay, so you put your hands here and then climb here and then try to do this. And they go, what? And then like a half hour later, I come back, they're still on it, like, that's the, and then a week later, they'll be like, you know what? I saw there's another one of those. And like, we talked about in the podcast about how does one work on curiosity? Are all people curious? I'm like, yeah, they are. It might take a catalyst. You might have to show them, just like somebody gives you a book. And yeah, if you try and read Frankel's, Man's Search for Meaning at the wrong time, like, this sucks, and then pick it up 10 years later, just like, best book ever, There's the same thing with physical challenge and physical movement. I got shown a whole new way to think about physical movement when I was pretty much out of shape. Not the worst shape I was ever in, but I was pretty out of shape. I fancied myself an in-shape martial artist. I went to his class. I was like, no, I am horribly out of shape, but oh my God, I'm hooked, and then I just, everything that I did just became interested in movement and problem solving and physical problem solving. And yeah, that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
There's a beauty, though, that marries the body with the curiosity, with the brain, right? Sure. We don't do that enough. And one of the things that you said on the podcast that I want to come back to now, some folks get stuck in not moving forward on a project, not moving forward on what they're writing, just stuck. And they don't leave the space. They stay there. Even like, my husband and I don't argue anymore now that we're 30 years in, we've just sort of figured stuff out. We kind of laugh about it.
He's always wrong. I got it.
Exactly. You're married, so right?
Yes, dear. No, I agree. You're right. Yes, dear.
But I remember when we were young, there was this challenge, like, you had to stay and argue it out. Like, that is like the idea of just picking ourselves up and moving us into another environment, outside, up, higher, lower, just this movement. I will unstick so many things that are just starting to lock in.
I had a podcast guest, Dylan Johansson episode, it doesn't matter. The woman that works with me on the podcast, she has all the numbers memorized. There's like 90 some of them. And like you give her a name and she'll be like, that person was in this episode and that episode. And I can never remember the numbers. Anyway, Dylan Johansson, we were sitting at his house drinking coffee. His dog is laying on my feet. So I often will say, this podcast is brought to you by coffee and other people's dogs, you know, like some petting his dog. And he said, long circuit, he said, I used to think about how to move. And now I move to figure out how to think, you know, or like something like that. Like I used to have thoughts to like, and I was just like, but I'm like having a conversation with a guy and I'm just like, I want to just drop the mic and press stop, you know, like how do we, and it's, so I love grammar and language and quotes. And I don't know, I love language. So I'm always hesitant when you hear something cool like that. That's a simple, like a literal turn of the phrase, and then flip around and says something. Oh, it's profound. I'm like, is it really profound, or is it just it works that you can use those words in either orientation? So at first I was like, that's awesome. Then I came back to it like, is that really awesome, or do I just love the fact that you can just turn those two sentences around and they work? And I'm like, no, I think that's actually pretty profound. About, you know, do you think about I'm going to go run? Or do you run in order to fix your thinking? And then I went, oh, perambulation. For centuries, millennia, people have talked about, oh, I don't know what to do. I get this problem, go for a walk. Perambulate, different from walking, right? Go out and perambulate, come back, problem is solved. I know what to do. So there's definitely a piece of that. And then after I like started thinking about that for a few years, I went, oh yeah, duh. Your brain, your central nervous system is connected to everything. Your central nervous system is in your toe. You have as many nerves in your feet as you do in your hands. You know, it's like, all right, there's something to this. And when I, maybe a decade ago, when I used to hear people talk about embodied practice, I'd be like, embodied, what is this, some fancy new age word? And then I'm like, no, actually what they're talking about is it's not my brain at the controls working, you know, back end loader Craig. It's all of me experiencing I love the word visceral. So like saying it is so visceral, the visceral feeling of jumping. I haven't been doing as much parkour as I should be doing, but a few years ago, I was able to do jumps that were like, if you're jumping maybe 8, 10, if you maybe it's a little bit down 12 feet, you know, like across, it's a long way to go. It's long enough for you to rethink your choices, you know, like, you're like, well, I hope this goes the way it was, you know, like, but you know, the story I told about the guy who stacked the stones and it got out of hand and took a picture of the moss. You have to listen to the podcast to get that joke.
Yeah.
I have a photo that somebody else took of me jumping. It's called The Body in Space because the photo gets taken of people so often. But it's a guy stood at the bottom. The dude who stacked the rocks really went crazy. Like oh my God. But it's a picture of me looking up between two dry stacked stone walls with that blue sky and me completely in flight. Like I am not on one side. I am not on the other side. I'm totally in the air. And, you know, and like, I mean, I don't think much of my personal body aesthetic, but I was like, okay, that looks nice. But what you can't see is, yeah, it's a huge gap, but the one side is vastly lower. So as long as you know how to do the landing, it's easy because you're going down. And it was just this, but the flight was just like, this is literally what it's like to fly. Because you can go, this is what it's like to fly. And then you land. Like there's time in the air. And that's an experience. I don't think most people get that. I mean, babies, you know why babies love when you toss them up in the air?
They're free.
Right? When's the last time you tossed yourself up in the air like that? And actually coming down wasn't going to be a disaster.
So one, I want that image for the podcast. I'll send it to the producer so they can add it. Like that would be
shit.
That would be bellissimo.
Yeah, bellissimo.
Bellissimo.
Oh,
but I want to go back to what you said about this the embodied experience, because yours is physical and mine is exactly the same thing with less, because we're both saying less mental. Less of the mental logic, because that experience
less of the story. I think you can't get rid of the mental logic. Less of the I'm talking about it's the Craig voice, blah blah blah. That goes away. Get rid of that guy.
Well, is it? Like let's dive into this, because when I was in the pantry picking out the peanuts, there was no logic to what I did.
Yeah,
right, or cashews, whatever it was. But my body was experiencing that, and I was just going with the sensation, the flow of what I was in. Like you do it in a different way than I do, but we're both moving in the same direction. And that's kind of where I want to go, right? This total experience, like my 3 words, my principle is love being human. Everything revolves around this idea because it is a practice, it's a journey, it's an evolving to become, to be able to do that, because you can't live this body, this experience, without that trajectory towards love. And love is just the enriching, the enlivening of the being in this life.
Yeah. My whole life is a giant, like there's a story that runs through the whole thing. I talk about joy and just millions of stories. And a lot of my stories are like, I don't want to tell them because, you know, if you look up who the person was that I was with, you'd be like, oh my God, you hung out with who? You know, like just so many places where in the moment I've realized, oh, you know, if this isn't awesome, who said that? Author, crazy hair guy, Slaughterhouse-Five, Kurt Vonnegut said, you need to like learn to, you know, look around and go, if this isn't awesome, I don't know what is. Like, you know, like be in the moment. And that's one thing that I really learned from what they call the parkour passport. So if you begin to play in the movement space, not to be confused with being any good at doing any of it, but if you begin to try, because it's a culture of effort, not a culture of accomplishment, you get accepted. I mean, there are some asshats who won't accept you. Like, you know, who's the fat kid, you know, whatever. But the vast majority of people will be like, oh, bro, you know, like come to my house in Turkey anytime, you know, standing invitation in Singapore, you know, and they call it the parkour passport. If you're willing to get on the plane or get on the bus, maybe after we have COVID under control, but you can go anywhere and, you know, 2 square meters on the floor, there's the bathroom, here's the Wi-Fi password, I'm in heaven, you know, and then we go tomorrow, we're going to go run and jump and play, balance on railings and have fun. So when I started doing that and just like, yeah, I'm going to go, you know, oh, wow, I had to buy a bus ticket. I can afford a bus ticket. I'm going to go to New York City for the day. And when I started doing that, that was when like new perspective, like, cause I've never been to this park before, novelty, the people that are here, I've met most of them. This person that I know, cause I'm crashing at his house, we've been having cool conversations for 40 hours. My cup runneth over with awesome. And then he's going to take me to the place that he loves to train. So like, he's more excited than you can possibly imagine. And then that rubs off on me. And at the end of the day, you're just like, how could you not possibly love that experience? And what did we do? Well, we rode some subways. I ate a donut. Okay. If you ever get to Brooklyn, go to Brooklyn donut plant, have a Brooklyn blackout. Oh, but we had a really good donut. And then we went and jumped around a little bit on this place that's internet famous for being a parkour spot, and then did this other thing. And then, you know, we went and had pho, you know, the bone broths, like, you know, pretty run of the mill things like you run, jump and play. You did that a lot as a kid. Like that's not really novel, but just the combination of these things in a new place. And the fact that I went, oh no, you know, a lot of times Melissa and I will be somewhere and something's going on, maybe not related to the interview we're supposed to be doing. And, you know, one of us would go, wonder what's going on over there. And I'll go, I don't know, let's go ask them, you know, just like, what are you guys doing? Oh, we're skateboarding or whatever, you know, just people, I mean, there are exceptions, but most people love to share their story and love to have a conversation. If you're interested, they love it.
Yeah. And what I want to go back to, and I wrote this down, because
I don't know how you do this. How do you manage to like, guess I'm blah, 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 you like grab something and put it on the pad and come back to it. See what I mean about like, I can make people laugh. Part of it is the voices and the faces.
And you have to listen to the podcast to hear about Craig's
we talked about
laugh.
this.
We did talk about this, about the class clown and the skill that you're developing. And laughter is carbonated holiness. That's what Anne Lamont said.
Yeah, see, I told you would come, just like let it go.
It's just
come
right
back.
there.
Laughter,
you let it go. Carbonated holiness.
That's great.
It is. But what I wanted to loop back to is you said in parkour, it's a culture of effort, not accomplishment. We talked a little bit about that on the podcast, and that is a jewel. That is literally an offering.
Amen, sister. Once more, louder for those in the back. There is a great book if you want to. I love that phrase. Once more, louder for those in the back. Yeah, I was already pretty. What do you call? not a show off. What does it mean? Want to be the center of attention? I was already like that. And then when you give me a microphone, if you're within the sound of my voice and you would like to learn about parkour without wasting your life, there are two really great books. My favorite book of all time, and I measure that by how many times I've read it, how often I've gone to it, and whether I've attempted to do a self-study course writing about every chapter, is called Parkour and Art du Déplacement. Just remember the author's name is Thibault, Thib as in boy, Ault, Thibault, gentleman from French Quebec. Just like type parkour, Parkour, and Thibault, and you'll find his book. It's a little thin volume, 89 chapters, I think. Each one is a page, like maybe a page and a half. The joke is because parkour people not smart, but it's really like a Zen book about what this is about. It's not about jumping from rooftop to rooftop. It'd be like the rose that grew from concrete, which is a Zen teaching. And it'll talk about, finding stillness or finding inspiration. So it's just these little 89 little vignettes. Great book. Very much cerebral and meditative about parkour. It won't tell you how to do a jump, won't tell you how to get to Lys or Evry in France. And then another good book, if you want more nuts and boltsy, what happened, there's a book, which I can see these on my bookshelf, called Breaking the Jump, which is a parkour term for, you'll see people in parkour who are looking at something. It doesn't have to be a literal jump, although it usually is, but something that's going to be a physical movement. And I'm not really sure that I want to do this. I mean, I know I can do it. I've looked at it. I've measured it. I can do that. But, there's sharks with lasers on their heads or something. And I'm not sure that I really want to commit to this. And you have to first decide whether you want to commit to it. And then, okay, I've decided there's value here. I'm going to learn something. I want to do this. Okay. Now, they have a button for this called. You have to just eventually go hit the button and do the thing. And I don't recommend doing that until you're sure, like, this is how it goes wrong. This is not, you want to know all that. You don't want actual surprises. But that book is called Breaking the Jump because it talks about that. It's written by a woman named Julie Angel, great author. She's like a visual anthropologist. So she shoots a lot of videos. So Breaking the Jump is a great book. And that one will tell you about, here are the names of the people who started it. Here's where it comes from the 80s in France. It comes out of this town that's a brutalist concrete architecture. It's like, oh, no wonder they were jumping on buildings. Look at that. You like, look at the place. Yeah. Like it was just this perfect melting pot right next to a more rural town called Lys that had parks and trees and stuff. So a perfect confluence of French immigrants in a suburb of Paris who, instead of getting into trouble, got into running and jumping and playing and challenging each other and doing crazy stuff, and really, really nice people, Anyway, Breaking the Jump and Parkour and Art du Déplacement. Actually, since we're doing a little more fun things, link to, there is a video that Julie Angel did. This is, people say, show me a video of parkour. This is the video that I give them. It's called Movement of Three, not a movement of three. It's just movement, one word, of three, THRE. And it's a video of three people. That's all I'm going to say. It's like 3 minutes long or 5 minutes, something. A movement of three. You will go, oh, after you watch that movie. Great little movie. It's got to be like 12 years old by now, but it's superb. I love the film.
I'm going to link to it. Thank you. Oh my goodness. So we've had an amazing conversation for the podcast, audio only, and now we're just riffing on video, and I'll add all these resources actually to the audio and to this video. It's been beautiful for me to become aware of your perspective and to see a little bit more clearly how your projects and your mindset and the way that you're traveling through the world is literally in the same direction I am, but so very different.
Ooh, parallel paths.
That texture, not even parallel. It's like a, how in the GPS when you're picking a location, you can pick.
Yeah, that looks like this. God damn it! I don't want to go that way. Go. Exactly. I always think I know a better route than the Jeep. Go to the left, and then it changes. I'm not looking. Sorry.
But that that is, so I'm reflecting in the moment about the experience we've just had, and that's what I've gotten from it. One, am so grateful. There are very few. I always say that my conversation in my community is for women and some super cool dudes. And that's what I'm recognizing, is that the super cool dudes that are having this conversation are 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 experiencing the depth of their living because they're marrying this logic with either right now, either their body or their philosophy, right? That
Yeah.
mysticism, spirituality, and the levels, kind of like audio, are different, but the sound quality, right, the quality of the experience of life is still at that level. And that's what I'm seeing in
That's a
this.
nice
And
observation. Yeah.
I just wanted to thank you for that, because like we said in the podcast, teasing to you listening to the podcast, right?
Missed it. Actually, you and I did a podcast interview. I think yours is better than my episode. But anyway,
We can't do that. We can't do that, Craig. The
sure I can. I was present for both of them. I think this one that we just recorded is way better than the one I did.
oh,
Anyway,
but oh darn it, you made me lose my track of thought. You didn't make me do it. I actually am more interested in this conversation. This is what you taught me also in that podcast conversation, is the way that our curiosity, our natural, our genuine curiosity leads us into something else. So I had already said that point where my curiosity brought me when you said that. And you said it in the podcast, and you've said it a couple of times here in the video, is the narrator of your head and how critical it is. So we've talked a lot about this embodied movement, about parkour, about novelty, but what we haven't really dived into, and this is what I'm super curious about, because it's, in my opinion, like the way that we build compassion is by understanding that narrator. So where or what in your life, either you want to tell a story, if you want to share a practice, what are you doing to make friends with that narrator, that lizard, that critical
yikes.
liar?
That's first of all, I have a therapist. That's step one. I highly recommend.
Is it a specific kind of therapy? Because I'm curious about all the different kinds. Just talk
therapy.
Okay.
I attempted to. I'm too smart for my own good. So the first thing I went was, well, what I really should do is have somebody deploy CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, on me to change behaviors that I want to do. And I went and I read the Pop Sci book, and I'm like, oh, screw that. And I went, I got the source material about like how CBT was. And I'm like, and then I basically came to the conclusion, it doesn't work that way. You can't CBT yourself. So it's not that therapy. So it's talk therapy. It's basically just talking to someone, which is as useless as it sounds. Like, and it's not even like really deep conversations. Like I would say this conversation was deeper and more fun, but that's because the therapist isn't interested in the bullshit. Not that I just bullshitted you for an hour, but if I tell a really cool story, I get no positive reinforcement.
Oh.
And it's almost as if he knows that there's a storyteller on my side of the thing, and like the person's job is to go like, yeah, that's a great story. But they don't say that out loud. They'd go like, but how did that make you feel? They don't say that. Like that's like, oh, please don't use that. But that sort of thing where they're like, yeah, I see your story. The one that you just like, look, I got a story. I see your story. What's behind that? Or like, how was last week? Oh, it was the best week ever. Why? Like it might take me 20 minutes to go, it's the best week ever, and then at the end it's why, or have you thought of, those kinds of questions. So yes, it's just talk. And at first, so I started, I'm recording. I started therapy as like a last ditch, like, okay, in case of emergency, break glass. Okay, I'm breaking the glass, like, because I don't want to get like committed. I'm not going that route. And I would really prefer not to have to be drugged. So I'm going to go talk to someone. I was like, well, as much as I love her to death, I can't talk to my wife. That doesn't work, because I need somebody with a different perspective. I need somebody whose intention is to very nicely scalpel me and go like, yeah, don't care. In fact, it might be like session after session after session after session. I'm like, yes, listening to Craig. There was something interesting kind of thing. So it's not it's probably the perfect process for me because it isn't, it's underspecified. You know, and me, I want to know the flow chart. How does this work? What are the percentage chance of the thing? And the whole diagrams there. I was a paragraph on the back of each photograph. But we're just gonna show up, and I'm gonna be here, and the other, we're gonna be here, and we're gonna have this conversation for an hour, and then we're gonna try and stop on time and see you next week, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, it's like, has it been helping? I have no idea. But when I look at my journal entries, I'm like, well, this year is vastly better than that year. So I don't know, but I don't, the stool now has 5 legs. I'm not taking any of these legs out. This is much better. So, was it, I think, 2020, as we said, was challenging. But I really haven't, I don't want to be mean, but I haven't found it particularly challenging. I'm like, the work that I do, where I work from home, it's podcast. I'm just like, okay, but is that because I didn't have challenges? When I look around, actually, I see all the same challenges everybody else had, Zoom fatigue and stuff, but somehow I managed to deal with them. So I feel like it was just a combination of, because I was already in therapy. So I had somebody to talk to. Like I always, and not like an accountability partner, but I always had somebody like, well, at this time I'll be talking about me, not how much fun did you have rock climbing. You're supposed to be talking about me, or what thoughts did I have that I wanted to share. So I would definitely recommend every which way. Finding a therapist is not easy, but I would definitely recommend finding a therapist. I think it's worth the effort, and it's going to be a lot of effort to find them, because insurance and healthcare and everything and schedules. And guess what? Every therapist in the world is jammed busy. They're all, because everybody wanted to go to therapy. So like everybody is talking to them, but I think it's definitely worth the effort. It's not something I've talked about a lot. But
Well,
another thing that I do for personal, like, what do I do for personal practice? Yeah, I do some physical activity, and I talk to someone and stuff like that. Read a lot, write write as much as I can.
But what I want to put a pin on that you mentioned in that piece is that is the right process for you. There is no one perfect path. And like I started with the divergent paths to the same destination. You mentioned CBT. I like CBT. I like ACT. I like, this one. I like that one. I like all of them kind of in the right season for the right place that I'm at. And we talked about this in the
tools.
They're tools. And we talked about this in the podcast, I think. I'm not sure if we talked about it here in the video, but if you get a book and it's not speaking to you 10 years from now, it could be exactly the thing that you needed to,
That was in here. I mentioned Frankel's.
It was in here? Okay.
Because I looked at Search for Meaning 20 years ago, and I was like, yeah, okay, whatever.
Have you seen his other book?
Then I reread it. I'm like,
Yes to Life. I just got it. He has another book called
I haven't read it, but yes, I know. It may even be on the shelf behind me. Is what I call the anti-library. It is almost entirely books I have not yet read. But the library of read books is somewhere else.
I have learned to accept that as a goal almost. These are the books that
not
I
even
want
a goal.
to read.
Not even want to read. The crap. There's a great quote which I have memorized, which is the search for what you yearn is inferior to the search for the source of the yearning. I think is how the quote goes.
Ooh.
Basically, if you're yearning for something, you can search, you can go after the thing that you yearn for, or even better, go after the source of the yearning. Because guess what? When you get the thing, there'll be more yearning. That's from Wu Sin, Wuhsin, which is as far as I can tell, a fictitious Chinese writer. So there's a thing called the Lost Writings of Wu Sin. I think it's written as aphorisms for thirsty fish. Like it's a whole bunch of like mind-bending things like that. Originally thousands of years old, blah, blah, blah. But I read that quote recently. I was like, yeah, that's a good, like don't quest for the things that you yearn for. If you have to, okay, go for it. But better would be, why do I yearn for these 9 things?
We talked about that on the podcast. We talked about the difference between this, success in air quotes, moving towards what you think will give you that sense of meaning and fulfillment versus that what you just said, which is the thing. And say it again.
The quest for the thing you yearn is inferior to searching for the source of the yearning. It's basically going after the thing you yearn versus going after the source of the yearning. It's a simple idea, but oh yes, what's up with that?
It's a mind-blowing idea when you dive into it. A metaphor I've used in the past that's coming to mind right now is the difference between pizza love and big love. Like in the moment, I might want a slice of pizza, but that's not really giving the the real yearning under the yearning, right?
Yeah.
It's
Why
not
do
the
you want
slice of pizza.
Yeah.
Because I'm almost never hungry, like in this day and age.
Yeah. I live in a food, not a food desert. I live in a food. There's food everywhere.
Oasis, right?
Yeah, food oasis.
I want to be respectful of your time, and I know I've gone over. I just want to I want to tease again the podcast because you just said two words that was also indicative. I hope I'm using that right because you say big words, and so I'm trying to be a little more like you. It was
I didn't need it.
No, don't be
One thing I will say
sorry.
is the tone of I'm like we were geeking out about audio in the podcast, and I was going to geek out on, but I was being mindful of how long we've been yammering about how the tone of that conversation, like what it sounded like, what the experience was like for me, was very different than I knew this would be. Because I don't want to say this is more what Craig is like, but this is closer to what I'm actually normally like. Whereas people who know me well would hear that podcast and be like, it's not Craig on Quaaludes or something. Like, well, it was like mellow, and there were like these long pauses, and I was like, yeah, turning off the video and just having an audio engagement changed who I was in that. I had the same intention. I didn't change my intention, but it changed. I'm like, oh, you can't see me. All right, I can sit here and pick my nose. It's like, it's cool. Nobody.
Well, and in the podcast, we actually paused for the listener to have an experience.
Yes.
If they weren't doing that.
Yes.
But you said two words, and these two words really encapsulate a lot of what we're talking about in different words with different language, in all the different stories we are.
The and
No. I'll give you one more guess, just because one more guess. The two words.
I'm gonna say
this is where I play that music in the
intention
background.
And listening.
The word that yes, but yes and the two words that really kind of landed for me that you said as a reflection is mind bending, and that's what we've been talking about within our time together. It's mind bending. The word that I use in my language is metanoia.
Oh yes.
It's all mind bending, like the practices I think that you and I are chatting about and that I want to advocate for folks who are listening is bend your mind. Figure out a way to bend your mind in any way. Movement, thought exercises, reflection, journaling, just mind bending so that you can travel those paths of
and the thing that bends it will not be the thing you expected. You'd be like, this is gonna, and you're like, what?
Exactly. Follow your curiosity too. I think I love that about our conversation from the podcast. So I don't even know how to close this. I just want to, first I'm going to say thank you. Thank you for the audio experience. Thank you for this experience. It's a delicious
My pleasure.
Little contrast. I'm just like, my mind is blowing. Like you're even up leveling my energy because I'm not usually this like,
Well, so, I can totally do the,
calm and down. I know.
This week with Vivian, we're talking about. My friends call it NPR Craig. Vivian Carrasco is a life coach.
Do you know, I used to be on radio and I never developed my radio voice.
Huh.
It was at KIUN in Pecos, Texas in high school. And I just never developed my radio voice.
Some would say that's a radio voice.
I mean, but like consciously going into it. But anyway.
I try to consciously stay out of it, right? My problem is I don't trust, like I'm always worried that I'm going to do something really, really important and it'll be like here and it won't be awesome. And I really feel like it's mission critical that I be right here, so I focus on the mentally, even if I'm looking at the screen, I focus on the microphone and then I get like pulled out of the cool aspect of it. I get lost in the tech. Anyway.
I just like to sometimes almost sense it near me.
Oh yeah, I'm normally, I like to hang out. The microphones are really good at picking up lower ranges. So when I get in, the closer I get to the mic, the better it. And then if I want to actually pitch a little lower, I can really, really get into the space. But this to me requires too much control. And also because I have headphones in or on, this gets a little close. Like I'm just like, oh my God.
And because you're Italian and you're talking with your hands.
Yeah. I've gotten pretty good at not smacking the microphone while waving my hands. That's why there's no stand. For a while I had a stand. It was like,
Is there anything you'd like to close with before we turn off the recording and just like kind of, I have all this rewinding to do in my brain over our conversation.
No, I think it was super fun. Thank you for making the space for the two of us to run and jump and play. And I agree. Stopping is hard. I swatted that problem, killed that problem by having a canned question I end with. Is like just.
Oh, tell us your 3 words. I love your canned question.
Oh, that's cheating. All right.
You opened the door.
It wasn't even fishing for that. My 3 words would have to be discovery, reflection, and efficacy.
Say more.
Pardon me? Say
more.
more. I thought you said same ones. About why the question or what those 3 words mean?
What the 3 words mean?
The 3 words. So I just call it DRE, discovery, reflection, and efficacy. I found that when I started the Movers Mindset Project, it originally was a website collecting writing. Then eventually it became more complicated. Then it turned into a podcast. And all along the way, what am I doing here? So I realized early, I'm having cool conversations and I'm loving it. So people wanted to share. They wanted to be part of that. But what am I doing? What am I trying to get out of it? And I have 3 business partners that work in the company that funds and oversees the project. And they're very philosophically bent. And we had some really cool conversations talking about what I was doing. What was Craig actually accomplishing for himself? Not what are people getting out of it? And I realized that I was like sifting through these ideas, and discovery winds up being, we toyed with maybe it should be observing or observation, but I like discovery because, and I wrote a big essay about this with other people's help. Discovery is an active process of going into the world with your curiosity. Well, that's interesting. And we've been talking about that, right? So that's the discovery part. The word means to uncover, like you're discovering, you're finding out facts about reality. And in the beginning, 20, 30 years ago, I was in the part, like a lot of people, who were in denial of how reality works. I think it's like this, like, no, you start going out there, and parkour was the gateway. You either can or cannot make the jump. You either smack or don't smack your shins on the railing. It's very clear, very objective reality. So that's the discovery part, was like this scientific experiment with myself. And then reflection was like, let's go look at that, or let's write that down, or let's think about how did that make me feel? Or it's almost like self-analyzing. How did my perspective change? Why did that change of perspective lead to this thinking? Is this reflection? And in discovery, you might begin to make theories which we should avoid. Like, oh, I don't think I'm that good, or I don't think I can do that, or I think I'm fat, or I think I'm smart. That your discovery doesn't actually validate that. So when you start reflecting, oh, I think I'm slow. Well, now we can go run an experiment. How fast are you? Can you get better? And if you can get better, when you start to reflect, now you realize that by discovering facts, I'm simplifying, but discovering facts and reflecting on that, and then doing experiments and realizing you can change, that's actually what's called efficacy, the ability as an agent to affect change in the world. That's literally what agency means. That's literally the definition of a human being, in my opinion, is, does it have agency? Your dog, unfortunately, doesn't really have agency. It's pretty simple. It's got a lot of discovery, almost no reflection. So it's never going to get to the efficacy part. So efficacy is this idea of having your agency be actualized. And then I realized that I was way off in the weeds in like psychology world. I'm like, oh, I didn't mean to do that. So those are my 3 words: discovery, reflection, and efficacy. And my blog, started blogging a decade ago, not with this intention in mind, but it has become the way that I reflect. It's like the overt, I'm showing my homework part of the reflection. That's what's happening there. I'm not really trying to change the world with my blog. It's just me thinking out loud, but it's visual. And I'm doing some of that reflection in the podcast, but I'm trying to more create space for others to reflect. So that's my discovery, reflection, efficacy. The source of the question and why I ask it at the end is a whole nother thing, but
that is beautiful. Thank you. That really, the language. I just want to thank you for taking that journey, for being a role model for other men who may be.
All I want to say is there's nothing, I didn't do anything special. all I did was I was honest about it. And like, I have a
Mm.
really nice, what I think is a nice vision and mission. My vision is a world where everybody can flourish. And my mission is to create better conversation, to share compassion and understanding. And I mean, whether or not people agree with that, most people go, oh yes, mic drop. That's awesome. I didn't start with that and then do I was like, I have no clue what I'm doing. And I did this and I did that. And then like 20, 30 years later, I went, why do I keep coming back to this same idea about flourishing? And I was like, because that's like the vision that I seem to have. And I always, when people say, I'm going to write a vision and a mission, like, it's like the vision and the mission fell out. The discovery reflection thing fell out after I did a whole bunch of work. So anybody can stumble through it all, just like I did. Don't feel like, please don't think, oh, it sounds like he has it all together, therefore I'm screwed. It's like, oh my God, no, he doesn't have it all together. And if it looks like it's together, it's only because I did a whole bunch of wandering around and then threw out all the rest of the stuff that wasn't interesting. So, yeah, I hope somebody somewhere finds it useful.
I'm sure they will. And actually, for those that are thinking this, the same thing that I'm thinking, I know that you do work with individuals. Oh, what did I do to my screen? You do work with individuals, and on your website, it says, send me an old school email.
Flex those language skills. I'm not overly critical. But,
what is your old school email? I want you to share. My
old school email is my first name, Craig, at my last name, Constantine, Constantine .name.
I just wanted, thank you. I wanted you to say that out loud for anyone who is like, I want more of Craig. I think he's the right guy for me to help me through this whole
you're more than welcome to email
and
me.
Listening.
Yeah. And if you just go to the website, is just Constantine.name. You can go there and like my email that, email me, that's on there along with everything else. So if anything that you've heard me say is in any way interesting, you'll find links to it off there, like Movers Mindset's linked off there. Some of the stuff I'm doing about trying to cultivate conversation is off there. I haven't yet, but I should put a link to Podchaser. I don't know if you've seen Podchaser. Is cool. I feel like you can go, I want to hear more from Vivian or Bob. You go to Podchaser, type in their name, and it'll say like they were a guest on these shows, they were a host on these shows, they were in. So like you can find all the things that I did in podcast universe.
What?
Podchaser. Oh yes. But that's super. Hey, listeners, if you hear a podcast with someone and you like it, go to podchaser.com. No relationship to me. I don't get a kickback. And type their name in, and it'll tell you all the other places that it knows about where that person has been a guest. So if you hear a really good conversation with someone, if you can hear like a second and a third one, it's really helpful. And so you can like group that stuff together by looking them up on Podchaser.
Thank you.
Gifts, yes, please.
Gifts.
Giving. Cool.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
I am going to stop the recording. Just thank you.
My pleasure.